Awesome. Well, it's going live here in probably 5 seconds, and we'll probably get started around 7:03.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, family. Good afternoon, good evening to you all. This is Pastor Samaj, and I'm here with some wonderful friends of mine from the Moms Demand Action. Actually, the Monmouth Ocean County chapter of Moms Demand Action, and this is our crucial conversation, as I've been talking about for the last few weeks, and definitely the last two nights, about crucial conversations that we need to have surrounding gun safety. And so I'm so glad that you all are joining with us on this evening, and I pray that you are blessed by all that. And that you learn something. So I want you to get out your notebooks and notepads, and be sure that you take notes in ways that will be beneficial for you. One of the things that's going to happen is there's going to be presentation, and during that time we ask that if you have any questions, you can put it in the comments below, on either on our Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. And using both of those methods, you can do that. And we're going to Minister Webb and I will see the questions. And after the presentation, we'll enter into that. We'll ask your questions, and these wonderful ladies will be happy to answer your questions, or let you get the answers to your questions. And so with that, I just want to introduce to you all Susan Gibbons, who is going to be doing our presentation. Susan is the BeSMART educator for the Monmouth and Ocean County chapter for Moms Demand Action. And this is a grassroots organization. They're not strangers to Second Baptist Church of Asbury Park, as they have been present with us for the last couple of years in at some of our community events. They've hosted events in our fellowship hall when the weather did not permit them to be outside. And so these are definitely friends and partners with us and our church in making sure that we get the work done and spread the word about safety, about just living, making our community what it needs to be. And so I'm so glad to have them with us. Now, before we get started, I do want to offer prayer for all of us on this evening, and then I'll turn it over to Susan and the wonderful ladies of the Monmouth Ocean County chapter for Moms Demand Actions. Let us pray. Gracious and all-wise God, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for bringing us through another day. We thank you, oh God, that you have allowed us to be in partnership with like minds and like spirits who want to see the peace and the reign of God to be manifest in our communities, down our street corners, and even in our homes. Now, Lord, we pray that you would bless every listening ear, that you would open every listening mind, that we might receive this information and then practice it and apply it to our very lives. For God, we know that in this, through that, we will give you all the glory, the honor, and praise, which is our purpose and our goal. This is our prayer. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, Susan, glad to have you. Take it over.
Thank you so much, Pastor Van Zandt. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about our organization. As Pastor said, my name is Susan Gibbons, and I am the BeSMART educator for our organization. And as Pastor said, Moms Demand Action is a grassroots organization that works to reduce gun violence in our communities. And we do that in a number of ways. We do that through working for common sense gun legislation. We do that by offering survivor support, connecting survivors with each other, and helping give survivors a voice. We do it through education and through community action. And I just wanted to introduce very, very briefly a couple of other team members that are on the call with us this evening. We have Christy Marciano, excuse me. Just wave, Christy. She is our city gun violence lead, and she works to form partnerships in communities, to specifically work in communities to look at the gun violence problem and to brainstorm and form partnerships to help reduce and prevent gun violence. We also have Nancy Lucas on our call, and Nancy is our red flag lead. We won't get into red flag laws really too much on this call, just maybe at the end if someone has a question about it. But red flag laws help people get guns removed from their homes if they feel someone living in the home is a danger to themselves or others. And if we have questions, we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the risk of guns and suicide in our teenagers. And lastly, Charlene Hoover, who's not on the call tonight. Sadly, she couldn't join us, but she is our survivor lead. And Charlene works tirelessly to connect survivors. She's a gun violence survivor herself. A survivor could be someone who's been impacted directly by gun violence as a victim, or someone who's lost someone to gun violence. So Charlene is a really good, invaluable resource to our group. We will have the email addresses and contact information for all those people available to you by the end of the meeting. Okay, so we're going to pull up our presentation. Amy's going to do that for us. And while she's doing that, oh, she's quick. Okay, you can just start the presentation. Good. Good. Thank you. Right there. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time tonight to learn about this very, very important safety issue that really affects all of us. So I really appreciate you willing to spend that time with us here this evening. You know, the pandemic has made a lot of us stop what we've been doing with our normal lives. We don't even know what normal means these days. Many of us our children have stopped going to school. Now they're sort of going, half and half going. Our jobs look different. Some of us have stopped working. Some of us are working only from the home. And even those of us who are working outside of the home have challenges we never dreamed of. But one thing that hasn't stopped during this pandemic is gun violence in the form of homicide, suicide, and unintentional injuries. COVID has led to additional risks to children's safety that we never could have imagined. Sadly, today, just today before we came on this call, I read about 2 young boys in Trenton who were killed inside their homes, no details, but a shooter from outside somehow shot into the home and 2 young boys were killed. With that in mind, that's a really hard thing to think about. So this is a really sensitive topic. So I want anyone on the call who needs to step away, take a break, please take care of yourself while we talk about some of these issues that might be a little hard to hear, especially if you've been impacted directly by gun violence. I'm going to talk about some statistics about firearms, and then I'll tell you some stories about children, just little snippets, little examples of children throughout the country who have been affected. And then we're going to really get into the meat of things by talking about 5 easy to follow action steps we can all take as adults to protect our children. Okay, next slide, please. In the United States, firearms are the 2nd leading cause of death for children and the 1st leading cause of death for Black children. As this slide shows, nearly 1,600 children under the age of 18 are killed with guns in the US every year. That's an average of 4 children per day. When children in America are killed with guns, the majority of those deaths, 52%, are homicides. That's more than 800 children per year. Additionally, more than 600 children die by firearm suicide each year, and nearly 100 are unintentionally shot and killed. Sadly, this year, a lot of those numbers are higher. For example, by the end of September of this year, there were 221 unintentional shootings, resulting in 93 deaths in our country. So we're on track this year to have a lot more than 100 children unintentionally shot and killed. Sorry, next slide. Some more numbers for us. We know that approximately 4.6 million children in the US live in a house with at least one loaded and unlocked gun. Just let that sink in a little bit. And while school shootings and mass shootings typically make national headlines, the reality is that for children under the age of 13, gun homicides most frequently occur in the home. And one study showed that nearly 90% of unintentional shooting deaths and injuries among children under the age of 15, once again, occur in the home. So the home can be a very dangerous place to our children. What's more, we know that in incidents of gunfire on school grounds, up to 80% of shooters under the age of 18 obtained the guns they used from the home or from their home or the homes of a relative or friend. Now, this is an emotional issue, and we all come from different walks of life. Many of you on the call tonight are parents. Some of you may be gun owners, and some are not. You may have had a personal experience with guns, and some of you may have been impacted directly by gun violence. We believe that most gun owners, the vast majority of gun owners, want to be responsible gun owners. So we are here today, this evening, to talk about what all of us, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, can do to make sure children don't have unsupervised access to guns. Next slide, please. So for now, let's all agree on some common ground. We all want kids to grow up happy and healthy. We each have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes, families, and communities, including whether or not to have a gun in our home. It is every law-abiding citizen's right in this country to own a home, to own a gun, and to have a gun in their home, but it comes with enormous responsibility. And if we can prevent even one child gun death or injury, it's our responsibility to do so. So we're not here to talk about laws or policies or how we feel about the Second Amendment. We'll put all that aside this evening and talk about protecting our children. Next slide, please. As we said, 1,600 children are killed by guns each year in our country. Let's look at some specific examples. On this slide, you'll see just a few headlines from stories across the country, although we know there are many, many incidents that go unreported. Some of you may remember from the news the first story in the top left, although I have to say, honestly, there's a good chance you don't remember this because we hear so many stories. In January of 2018, there was a school shooting in Kentucky at Marshall County High School. More than a dozen students were shot and wounded, and two of them, Bailey Holt and Preston Cope, were killed. The 16-year-old shooter had gained access to his stepfather's unsecured pistol from his bedroom. The next tragedy, on the upper right, took place in May of 2018. A 4-year-old boy from Louisa, Virginia, unintentionally shot his 2-year-old brother, Tyson, after accessing an unsecured gun that was kept high in an upper cabinet. Sadly, toddlers between the ages of 2 and 4 are most at risk in the home for unintentional shootings because they simply don't understand. The next headline on the bottom left illustrates that when kids are looking to carry guns out of fear, easy access to guns can help facilitate the cycle of violence. Like 17-year-old Zeke of Jackson, Mississippi, who told the Jackson Free Press that some young people in his community carry guns out of fear of being robbed or shot and believe that having a gun will allow them to defend themselves. So we see that's such a struggle. How do we interrupt that cycle of violence? Kids might feel unsafe, they get a gun from home, they take the gun. Other kids see someone has a gun, they want a gun too. So that's our challenge, to break that cycle. And then lastly, let me also point out our final story about 13-year-old Mikey from Brewster, New York. Mikey was a popular 8th grader, an expert bowler, an avid athlete, and he loved video games. In January of 2013, Mikey came home from school, took one of his father's unlocked, loaded guns, and shot himself. His family knew Mikey to be a happy kid, and they don't believe he had planned to die that day. But with easy access to a loaded gun, Mikey made an impulsive decision that tragically became a fatal one. All 4 of these stories show the fallout of when young people get their hands on unsecured guns. No story is quite the same, but all are tragic, and most importantly, all are preventable. Next slide, please. It's important to remember that even if you are practicing secure storage, or if you don't have a gun in your home, you can't be sure about other homes. You can't be sure about how responsible other people are being. And that's where our BeSMART program becomes helpful. So what can we do? We can learn to be smart. And as you see here, SMART is an acronym for those 5 steps. and we'll go through each one. Next, please. Let's start with S. Secure your guns in homes and vehicles. 13 million households with children contain at least one gun. And the majority of children in gun-owning households know where the gun is stored. That's a fact. A lot of adults don't think that's true. They think their kids don't know. Kids know. The older they get, the more they know. We already know that in incidents of gunfire on school grounds, the majority of shooters under the age of 18 get their guns from their homes or the relatives of home, or in the home of a relative or friend. So let's talk about securing guns. What do I mean by securing guns? Guns should be stored locked and unloaded with the ammunition stored separately. Hiding a gun is not securing a gun. And we know that that belief can lead to tragedy. We talked about the 4-year-old Virginia boy who unintentionally shot his 2-year-old brother just because he found the gun somewhere. And we mentioned Zeke from Mississippi, who spoke of the complicated safety reasons that push some teens to want a gun. Keep in mind that kids may feel a variety of emotions about guns, from curiosity to fascination to fear. As adults, it's our responsibility to prevent easy access to guns. Research also finds that secure storage is associated with a decreased risk of firearm suicide and unintentional firearm injury among children. Some commonly used secure storage practices include using a cable lock, a lockbox, or a firearm safe, as well as storing firearms unloaded with ammunition stored separately. Very important. Unsecured guns also contribute to the staggering number of guns stolen each year. An estimated 380,000 guns are stolen from private gun owners every year, and gun owners were 3 times more likely to have a gun stolen if they carried a gun in the last month. Research also suggests nearly 1/4 of stolen guns are taken from cars. So storing a gun in a glove compartment or underneath a car seat is not considered secure storage. Next slide, please. M is for modeling responsible behavior. Every law-abiding adult, as we said before, has the right to decide whether or not to have a gun in the home. But you can't rely on curious kids not to find a gun. As we saw on the slide before, one study showed that the majority of children are aware of where their parents store their guns, and that more than 1/3 reported handling their parents' guns, many doing so without their parents' knowledge. It is always an adult's responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to guns, not a curious child's responsibility to avoid guns. Talk to your kids about gun safety, but remember, that's a precaution, not a guarantee. One study found that young children who go through a week-long gun safety training are just as likely as children with no training to approach or play with a handgun when they find one. I actually saw a video about this very topic a while back, and it was startling to see that the children just couldn't help themselves. They said the right things, don't touch it, as they were touching the gun, as they were handling the gun. It was really, really scary. Modeling responsible behavior means that smart adults make sure that kids don't have the opportunity to access guns. That said, you can't control the environment that your child is in all the time. So you should teach them not to touch a gun if they come across one, real or pretend, and give them the tools to get out of a dangerous situation and to alert an adult. As an adult, it's your responsibility to do everything you can to prevent them from getting in a dangerous situation to begin with. Okay, next slide, please. As we have mentioned, there are approximately 4.6 million children in the US living in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. That's why you need to ask about firearms in other homes your child visits, the A in SMART. So for parents and caretakers on the call this evening, consider some of the things you ask before you allow your child to go to a friend's house or a babysitter's house. You might, if your child has a food allergy or is allergic to pets, you might want to ask about pets in the home and tell the person about your child's allergies. If it's an older child, you're going to probably check about adult supervision and access to alcohol and things of that nature. So just like you ask about these safety issues, it's important to ask about guns in the home. Next slide, please. Asking about guns in the home should be as natural as asking about any other safety issue, but it can seem awkward at first. When I was raising my children, who are all, grown up now, I never even thought about this, but I should have. And I'm lucky that we didn't have a tragedy, but it's so important to ask. You can try making a part of your general safety conversation, like we were just talking about, and you might try just texting or emailing to kind of take away the awkwardness if you're uncomfortable at first. And we've also found that another good method is just to volunteer information about yourself by saying, I'm really glad Joey's coming over tonight. Just want you to know we have a dog, but I'll keep him away if you'd rather. And we don't have any guns in the home. I was told to mention that just to sort of model it for other people. Plus, it gets you used to talking about it. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, one more thing. Also, if you have older children, sorry, Amy, it's also important to ask about if your child's going to babysit in other people's home, to ask about guns in that home where your child is going to babysit. And your teenager might need some help with that because the teenager wants to make money and babysit and doesn't want to tie things up in knots by asking questions. So that's where sometimes we have to take over a little bit. Okay, thanks, Amy. So now let's talk about recognizing the role of guns in suicide, the R. Access to a gun can mean the difference between life and death. We saw that in Mikey's story. As our children get older, you may need to consider taking another look at your storage methods if you are a gun owner. If you've been using a simple cable lock, you may want to think about getting a gun safe. We all know how curious children can be. So as they get older and more resourceful, we need to act accordingly. Take this information into consideration. Most people who attempt suicide do not die unless they use a gun. In fact, 90% of suicide attempts with a gun result in death, a much higher fatality rate than any other means of self-harm. This contributes to the fact that 40% of child suicides involve a gun. So if you have a loved one who's in distress, teenager who you think is depressed, as an example, you might want to consider temporarily removing your guns from your home if you are a gun owner. If you want to do that, that's where the red flag laws come into play that I mentioned earlier. And if people have questions about that, they can ask Nancy, our red flag lead, at the end of the discussion. But just for your information, some licensed gun dealers or gun ranges may be willing to temporarily store your guns. You can also ask a trusted friend or relative to store your guns, keeping in mind that it's very important that you deliver the gun to that person in a locked safe and you don't give them the code and you have the ammunition separate. Or you can have local law enforcement. Perhaps you can reach out to them and ask them to temporarily store the guns for you. Okay, next slide, please. The National Youth Survey conducted by the Centers for Disease Control showed that 17% of high school students surveyed had seriously considered attempting suicide within the last year. That's a lot of kids. And one study showed that 41% of adolescents, 41% in gun-owning households report having easy access to the guns in their home. We can all see what a dangerous, potentially deadly combination that could be. And as we discussed, research shows that secure firearm storage is associated with a decreased risk of child firearm suicide. Next slide, please. Here are some resources if you wanted to reach out. And I wanted to mention also that we have a number of resources that I will provide to Pastor Van Zant. So in order for him to share them with everyone, we have information on safe storage, on recognizing suicide risk, and among other topics. And I will share all of them with Pastor Van Zant. Next slide, please. Now we move on to our last letter in SMART, T, tell. That's the power of being smart. We've heard from people that because of BeSMART, they know how to ask about the presence of guns before their children go to other people's homes, that they recognize the role of guns in suicide, and the gun owners are modeling responsible behavior as a direct result of BeSMART. It is vitally important that the people who own and work with guns are part of this conversation. Research shows that law enforcement, the military, hunting or outdoor groups, as well as private law-abiding gun owners are particularly effective at communicating secure storage practices. The need to spread the BeSMART message is more important now, really, than it's ever been. Consider this: between March and August of this year, there were 11.8 million guns sold in our country. So the problem, sadly, is very much with us. Next slide, please. Since the inception of BeSMART in May of 2015, just 5 years, thousands of volunteers have been trained to deliver the BeSMART message at community presentations, tabling events, and in other venues. And as Pastor Van Zant mentioned earlier, your church has helped us spread the BeSMART message by inviting us to your community day, hosting us at our Wear Orange events for the last 3 or 4 years. It's partnerships like this that really mean the most. Even talking to a small group in someone's home can be effective. We like to say that the first step to saving a child's life could be in your living room. That's what grassroots work is all about, right here, right now, in every home, right in our communities. So if you have any interest in having a BeSMART presentation with another group that you might be part of, or if you'd like to become a BeSMART educator, presenter, to spread the message in your own, among your own community, we would be more than happy to partner with you, have you join us, and help us spread this very important safety message. And that's all I have.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you. Thank you so very much. And it's been great to see, the engagement on the chats and family. If you all have any more questions, just continue to put them up. One of the questions that was raised, and I think, well, let me just say, I really want to emphasize about the securing the guns right in your own home. And but more than that, asking, right, especially for us, we have a lot of parents with younger children, and we send them over to different people's houses, or they're playing with their friends, not so much in the pandemic, but before and afterwards. But that's a question that I know for me, I've never asked, right? And I've got young kids that I send, but I think that is a great question, right? And I do think there is some fear in that, right? Just, I guess it seems like common courtesy, but I think I appreciate Moms of Men Action and you are making an effort to normalize the asking of that question without a response that is that is negative or abrasive or what have you. So I think that that's great. One of the things, questions, that was asked on the chat is about, this idea of where is this, as you all look at it, where does this issue of gun violence come from? Right? Is gun violence just from people not putting guns in safes, or is there some larger issue at play that causes gun violence? And I say that because, and this is not a political statement, but just in the news, you're hearing of the uptick in, I think Pennsylvania reported that they, have sold double the guns, from last year, or in some amount of period, they had, sold a lot of guns, and this happening in states all across the country. And for whatever the reason may be, right? So now, if this is what you said, 11.8 million guns last year, then I mean, we may be looking at, who knows how many guns in 2020, right? Is this gun violence a part of a larger issue that we can also look at, address, when we do the telling to our peers, right? That we can also explain to them and try to figure out a way to partner or to address, look at.
Does anybody want to take that? I would just say that unfortunately, every state has their own set of gun laws.
Mm-hmm.
In New Jersey, the gun laws are quite stringent, but in Pennsylvania, they're not. So many of our illegal guns come into New Jersey from states with much looser gun laws. And that is something that our organization works on, trying to improve gun laws, make buying a gun harder than it is in a lot of places, background checks and open carry and all that, all those very complicated issues. I don't know if Amy or Christy or Nancy want to chime in.
Yeah, I'd like to, Sue. Thank you so much. I think one of the things that, as you were talking, Pastor, is one of the things that stands out is specifically why we're here this evening. Of the 100 people a day that die due to gun violence, 2/3 of them are from suicide. So, I think this presentation is particularly, words are escaping me. Helpful is not nearly the correct word, but you get where I'm going with that, in reference to suicide. And your question to, are there, what can we do and what are all the factors? I actually think that as with anything, that there are a number of factors that are going to be involved in gun violence. And I think it's going to be dependent on the situation, whether we're talking, if it is a suicide, if it's a homicide, if it's an unintentional shooting. I think there are a myriad of the factors that are involved with that. And I think that it also, to how to help prevent that, how do you talk about it within your community and in your homes? It's community partnerships like this, in the sense that, what is happening in this community might need this particular emphasis, whether it's an epidemic of suicides, which Sue had talked about some other time, or in this particular situation over here in this community, we do have a lot of gun owners, but they may not have enough access to safe, secure gun storage. In another area, as Sue had mentioned, state to state, there are different laws and regulations about gun ownership. So maybe it's a matter of, getting those common sense gun regulations in place. So I don't think that there is one nutshell answer to that, except that you really want to work with the community that you live in and work together to make the place that you're living safer.
Yeah. No, that's great. Amy, I really appreciate you saying that. And I just want to put in a plug, that for the church, I haven't talked about this in detail yet, but we are partnering also with an organization called, that it has the Stigma Free Pledge, right? Where we are just saying that we're going to be a place where mental health and, and those who are struggling with that can come and be and not have to worry about being stigmatized or being talked about or or being judged, because mental health is a real issue. It's affecting way too many people, and there are too many people who are silent about it. And gun violence, as was just mentioned, or as we're talking about this evening, it becomes the result of that, right? 2/3 of gun violence is suicide. That is tremendous.
Yes.
And I think so definitely another part of our role is to take the stigma off of mental health and say, listen, from the church side, you can have Jesus and a therapist too, right? You can, they're not mutually exclusive, but they can be, but you can have both of them at the same time. And so I think for saying that definitely highlights something. For,
Yes. And then just to hammer in that point as well, Sue had already mentioned this in her presentation. When it comes to attempted to take one's life, guns are 90% effective. They result in death. And any other attempt of suicide, any other means of suicide are not nearly effective. I don't know if you have that statistic, Sue.
Right.
So it is put it very bluntly, highly deadly means of attempted suicide.
yeah. Wow.
And teenagers are so impulsive. They have a bad day. They don't have that frame of reference that we as adults have. They don't have the experience to know that, they're devastated because they broke up with their girlfriend. They think life is over. We know that they'll get over it, but they go home and they find dad's gun in the bedside table. Horrible day, really impulsive decision. And then that's it.
And another thing that I thought of while you were asking that question was, um, you know, the pandemic is happening. There has been a huge uptick in gun sales. Part of that, behind that huge uptick in gun sales across the board at any point in time, is going to be the sense of fear in people. Right? They have a fear of their guns are going to be taken away. They have a fear of, of the unknown, whatever the case may be. And part of what's involved in that is who is selling fear, in the sense that buy more guns, buy more guns. Once they have been purchased, and Sue or someone else on the call might be able to speak to this because I can't remember the exact term, but if there is a delay in a background check, and it hasn't passed within, I believe it's 3 days, the sale automatically goes through. So when the system is overwhelmed, when the background check system is overwhelmed and they're having a delay in processing, after 3 days, I believe it is, the background check automatically gets cleared and goes through.
Wow.
So you would also think, and I don't have numbers to speak to this, but you would also think that if there is a delay in a background check, there might be a reason for that. And that would be the last person that you would automatically want to pass through for that sale. So that is also, it's also part of that equation that you were asking about, of all of those different things.
Wow. Kervin, I know you had a question. Or...
Yes, thank you all for your presentation, Susan. Thank you so much. And in your intro, you sort of made the point to say that we're going to push aside the implications of the Second Amendment. But how do you separate talking about gun safety from those who just, in a polarized reactionary climate, anytime you talk about guns, it is gonna be, I'm not listening. How do you?
Yeah, it's just trying really hard to have that, I keep saying, that grassroots effort, just people right here in our community having conversation. And also, we try really hard to respect the Second Amendment. We are not, as a group, anti-Second Amendment. It's everybody's constitutional right to own a gun, but we believe it brings enormous responsibility. And what we try to do is make people really understand that and take responsibility for this decision they've made to have a gun. I mean, we all have our own personal feelings about gun ownership, but it is the law, and people are law-abiding citizens are entitled to purchase guns. So we have to work with that. But
And I think tagging on to that, the other part of that is the part where moms demand action works towards common sense gun regulations. Um, part of the language that we really wish would change is that it stopped being referred to as gun control,
right,
because as a mission statement, we're not trying to control anything. We're trying to put into effect common sense gun legislations that's going to help save lives. And whether that's going to become, from background checks or red flag laws, which we have not really touched base too much on, but are super effective um, in reference to getting guns temporarily out of a situation, whether someone might hurt themselves or hurt someone else. And that is through a judicial process, by the way. There's a lot of Second Amendment people. There's, what's the group called? 2A, I believe it is, who are going to say that it's a way to take your guns away, take them away permanently, and that is not the case. Red flag laws are specifically made to take guns temporarily away from someone who is possibly going to hurt themselves or others. So it's things like those, situations like those, that we are trying to enact common sense regulations to help save lives. And we really try not to get into a tit for tat in reference to the Second Amendment.
Yeah,
So, and it is difficult. It can be difficult.
yeah, I think definitely that language, will just a change in language will definitely be much. I think it sounds better, and I think it helps people understand more what is being done. And I think the same common sense legislation reduces the fear
right.
of my guns are being taken away. I would because we mentioned it, and I think Nancy Wright is the one who is with the red flag.
Mhm.
If you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us just a brief overview, just a couple minutes, would I think that is valuable information, because we may have people listening who have guns in the home, and as Susan was talking about, right, we all have some stressful moments, and we all, whether older, young, have some bad days, and so and the hope is that we have somebody in the home who is has the presence of mind to be able to help us not to hurt ourselves or hurt anybody else. And so, Nancy, if you can please just talk about the red flag and what what that's about, and the work that you're doing there.
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to. So in New Jersey, we're one of 19 states that has what are the ERPO laws, protective laws in extreme situations. So they vary obviously from state to state, just because our gun laws vary so much from state to state. But in New Jersey, a loved one, a relative, someone living in a home with somebody else is entitled to reach out to law enforcement, and there is supposed to be a contact person in each police department who can handle these requests, to petition to have guns removed for a temporary period from the home to keep somebody who is a danger to themselves or others, typically, most often a danger to themselves, away from the home. And there's a hearing, it's a civil process, and the guns are returned once the person is deemed safe to have the gun returned. And obviously that period can vary, and the hope is that person will get the other resources that they need in that interim, not just having their guns removed, but if you are in a situation where you could hurt yourself or someone else, other resources should be bolstered up at that point as well. So in doing so, it's just the removal of the gun, that impulse that we were talking about before, that intersection of mental illness and gun, and that moment where someone would do something drastic. So, one of the things that I wanted to chime in, and I think it's really important that we note that people with mental illness are actually more likely to be a victim of gun violence than there shouldn't be an automatic assumption. Those two things are not necessarily intertwined. It's not typically violence associated with mental illness, but it's that moment of despair where things seem so hopeless and a gun is available. That's where we're trying to reach people, and that's where loved ones will see that and report it. And Sue had talked before about putting guns somewhere safe if you're not feeling comfortable, and it's for children in BeSMART, we're keeping the firearms safe in the home, but this is probably more for older children. And oftentimes somebody will say, I have a gun at home, and the protective orders are in place for those moments, the moments of heightened intensity. So it's really important to remember it's temporary. There's no record, for the person who's had the gun removed in New Jersey. It's really just to mitigate a bad situation in the moment. So
actually, Nancy, I'm not sure because I don't know the answer to this question. Is the first step in each one of those situations contacting law enforcement, or can you go through a therapist? Could a therapist or a psychologist initiate that
For your
as
pastor.
well? Or your pastor?
In New Jersey, it is, I can get the exact language, and I'm fairly new to this. I've only done one small presentation myself. So in New Jersey, it is somebody directly related in the home, shares custody of a child. So it's a closer relationship than that. So language in other states does have teachers and other people. So that's not to say that a pastor who sees a situation like that can't say, hey, we have these protective orders in place for you to use for your loved one. But
Right.
at the moment, it's not something that an outside individual can get involved in. There are other ways to do that, though.
And that loved one, their first step would be going to law enforcement, correct?
Yes, which is, obviously a tricky point, right? That's not typically the first place people go in these times, and it's something that people are discussing and working through and acknowledging, that's not. We have to get better with that. It's been, the law's only been in effect in New Jersey for a little over a year,
Right.
so.
Yeah, Nancy, let me put in something here for our congregation and those who would listen to this. I want to say that I know in many of our in our community, right, calling law enforcement is the last thing that that they want to do. And while we cannot, and I'm hearing that the legislation does not allow for the guns to be given to a pastor or someone at the church. Know that if you call the church, that we'll make sure we have individuals, we have law enforcement people who are connected with our church, our associate pastor, right? Of course, it's ex law enforcement. I work with the police. We have other members who can, without going, to the law enforcement yourself, we can help facilitate getting the guns to a safe place. So that it is out of the home and out of the place where your loved one can cause danger to themselves or harm to somebody else. So I just want to put that out, that we know in our community you all don't want to call the church, and we'll help facilitate getting guns to to the safe place and the right place, because the thing that we want is for everybody to get help, not to be
right, to be safe.
Agreed.
And that is really where it does take a village. It takes a community. It takes everybody's involvement. It takes resources. It's not just about removing the gun. That's the immediate step. And knowing that people have those resources is crucial. And we wish that for everybody. And the people in your congregation are blessed to have that in their lives.
Right.
So, but the law is really just, for everyone, people who don't have that. So knowing that there are other resources available is crucial. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Um,
Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy, you made a statement about resources, and this will bring it back. So, as part of what you do as Mom Demand Action and the ways that you're trying to help reduce gun violence, you said education and community action is one of those things. Um, how might we engage you all? Because a lot of when I'm thinking about young people with guns, and a lot of it is fear. They're protecting themselves, or they're afraid of this or afraid of that. So those are underlying issues that kind of sparks that up. How do you see what you all have being able to help mitigate some of those fears that children have, or even being in the home unsupervised while their parents are at work, to where they can get to a gun? Like, are those the types of educational or community action that you have in place, or can be developed?
Well, certainly the education piece, just educating parents about the importance, the utter importance of securing any weapons that are in the home so the children don't have access. But we also, through community action, I was really, and Christy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but working with partnerships in the community, like-minded organizations like the Second Baptist Church in Asbury Park, who is looking to prevent and reduce gun violence. We see our role, and Christy, please chime in after I'm finished. We see our role as supporting you in what your goals are for your community. So if you want to spread the word about safe storage, we're happy to go to your event and tell people all about safe gun storage. You're looking to try to break that cycle of violence in the community with youth being fearful and arming themselves. That's a lot more complicated, but we see our role as helping you. You take the lead, tell us what you want us to do to help you, and we'll support that. And maybe brainstorm what we can do, because messages are best received when they're delivered by the people who live in the community. So we would tend to stay in the background and just help you, support you with whatever resources we have. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Christy, did you want to add anything?
Sure, yeah, actually. So aside from what we're doing tonight, Pastor Van Zandt and Kerwin and I are all trying to get together so that we can talk about what sorts of initiatives the Second Baptist Church wants to see in the community in Asbury Park. Just so everybody knows, I'm also a local resident. I live in the area. And so we're going to be working together, and then hopefully we'll be able to get some people from the congregation, some people from the community to also put in their input, like Sue just mentioned, on what sorts of ways we can support you guys from the background, basically, resources that we can set you up with. And so we're going to be in talks about that. And yeah.
Thank you.
And I would also say to that, to just hammer in both of those points, is it's one thing to say that kids are fearful and they have guns and they're carrying it to protect themselves. That's very a large point. It's going to be talking to the community members to say exactly how you think the kids are getting the guns, what you think the other points are affecting that situation. And that goes to the brainstorming and working as community partners on hearing from a specific community what the exact issues are and what steps you think need to be taken and how we can work together to achieve the goal of ending that gun violence.
That's great. That's great. I tell you, this is such a wonderful conversation. I am so grateful and glad that we were able to have this, conversation. And Susan, I definitely appreciate your presentation. That was great, and I look forward and I hope family, I want to encourage you to go back right through it. I tried to make sure that you are smart, right? That you are doing the things that are smart, and especially if you know somebody, right? I think that T is the most important, right? That we
Yeah.
need to make sure that we're telling other people about what you've heard and what you've learned, because we do know that, and I just want to say that whether I think this applies whether your gun is legal or not, right? We don't support illegal guns,
Of course
but
not.
if you happen to illegally have a gun, please secure it,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we first of all, we encourage you to return it or get rid of it, in some type of way, and then to make sure that the guns that and the firearms that you possess are legally purchased and everything through the state. It's the best way to go. But whatever firearms are in your possession, please, please, please secure them, because we cannot stand to lose another life. We cannot stand to have somebody else hurt. And I think it also stands to be mentioned, right, about it's been said, but just to emphasize the separation of guns and ammo, right? Just to that's a big thing. I think they ought to both be locked up, right? You ought to lock both of them up, and if possible, putting them in separate places and just so that it's most secure. But definitely, let's all strive to be smart in everything that we do, especially in relation to gun safety and in our efforts to prevent gun violence. Well, Amy, did you have something? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to very briefly also mention, because she's not here, Charlene, who is our state survivor lead. One of the things that has always been for all of us who have done the community day events with you, Pastor, and your family, is the amount of people that have come past the table and talked to us and the experiences that they've had and they're survivors of gun violence. I really, really want to stress that Moms Demand Action and the Everytown Gun Survivor Network is a huge network for survivors and a great resource. So I know Sheila and or Sue has already probably given you that information for Charlene, but if anyone in the congregation within your family needs any help along those lines in reference to gun violence survivors, she is a fantastic resource. So I wish she was here to speak for herself, because she could certainly do it much more eloquently than I am, but please don't hesitate to reach out in that sense either.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Tell me, how do if somebody wanted to become a part of Moms Demand Action or be part of the work, directly with the group, how would they participate and join up?
Please, Amy, take it away.
Oh, Sue, I was going to let you do that. You can text, it's text to 63344. Did I get that right, Sheila? 64433.
It's 4433.
Text volunteer.
Now you're muted.
You're muted.
And I know Sheila had sent that information to the pastor as well.
Amy, can you repeat that? You were muted.
Text volunteer to 64433. And that's going to hook you up with whatever local, I'm assuming everyone here would be Monmouth or Ocean County, but you never know. It's going to hook you up with your most local chapter for Moms Demand Action. I know Sheila has sent that information to Pastor Van Zant. I know he has Sue's contact information, who can also get
Absolutely.
you started with BeSMART if you would like to have a presentation with another community, another organization that you belong to in your home, a school affiliation, whatever the case may be. And we would really love to have, have you all join us and grow the family that we have here at Moms Demand, because we think it is a very important goal to reduce gun violence. It is an epidemic in the country.
Yeah.
And I would just like to add, I'm sorry.
Text. I was just letting them know that the information's in the chat, and for you all there. So you heard it, and its information is posted right there in the chat. And we'll make sure that it's also in the comment section or the description once we get through, once we post the YouTube, to the page.
Great.
Pastor, I would just like to make a plug for BeSMART, because I am always looking for new volunteers to join me in becoming a BeSMART educator. Right now, I'm the only BeSMART educator in our group. So I will train you. I will embrace you when I'm able to. I'll hug you so you can come and be a BeSMART presenter with me. And the more people who spread the word, the better. So please, if you think you might want to do that, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. And I'm putting Susan's email and things in the chat also for you all to be able to contact her. I tell you.
And right now we're the Monmouth Ocean Moms Demand Action Chapter. We have monthly meetings that we're doing virtually. So as probably previously mentioned, now is a great time to get involved with organizations that maybe you had not had time previously to, because all our monthly meetings are virtual.
Yeah, awesome. I really cannot express to you just the gratitude that I have for you all taking the time to make this presentation and to talk about gun safety, because gun violence is such a large problem that we need to spread the word so that we can save, more lives, that we can prevent more harm being done to either people or people you don't know. But it's important for us to really reduce gun violence in our community. And while it is part of larger issues, definitely a major portion of that is gun safety. And I'm loving, this. I just learned about these red flag laws, and so definitely please use them, exercise them, and again, if you don't want to go to the law enforcement, call the church. We'll help you facilitate the safe storage and temporary holding of any firearms, just to make sure that somebody's safe and everything goes well. Well, I know you all. I see you already putting the thank yous in the chat. Let us just express some great appreciation to the Monmouth Ocean County chapter of the Moms Demand Action. We're so grateful. You all are friends, and hopefully we get a chance to see each other again. And we'll make sure that we incorporate this even more and partner in ways that that are possible. And as Christy mentioned, we're looking at some tangible and practical ways that we can also apply everything that we've heard. So I'm really excited. Thank you all again. Family, have a blessed week and evening, and we'll see you all on Sunday morning virtually for our worship experience at 10 a.m. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.